Hi guys, let's talk about morphology. So morphology, as you have learned, is the structure of how words are formed in a specific language. So I hope that you'll be able to, by the end of your work in morphology, you'll be able to define morphology in a morpheme. You'll be able to identify morphemes in English words and different word formation processes. And I hope you'll be able to identify student L2 second language morphology errors. So I have this word here. I'm going to look at this word and I think I want to know, do you know, what does this word mean? The word is releap. And if I ask you what it means, you would probably say it means to leap again, maybe. And so then I would ask you, well, how do you know that it means releap? I'm sorry, that it means to leap again, that releap means to leap again. And you might say, well, if you take that word apart, it has two parts, what we would call morphemes, re and leap. Leap meaning to jump, and re meaning to again, to do something again. We can add it to a verb to mean to do it again. And you know this because you know English morphology. You know what these morphemes mean, and when you combine them together, you know what that means for the meaning of the word. And so then I ask you, is this an English word? Some of you are probably like, I've never heard this word before, and so I don't think it's a word. Maybe some of you are like, well, I've never heard it before, but when I see it and hear it, I know what it means because I can break it apart using English morphology rules and forms. And so I use this as a funny story I have a funny story that goes with this word or non-word, whatever you think it is, that one time my family and I were playing Scrabble. This was years ago, but we were playing Scrabble, and the word leap was on the board, and I added re to it to try to score some points. And the rest of my family, a lot of them were kind of like my sister-in-law, my brother, they were like, that's not a word. And at the time, we didn't have the official Scrabble dictionary. So they challenged me that this wasn't a word. And so what we did have was a really big dictionary. That's like one of my favorite books that I have, is just a really big dictionary of English words, of course, and it's literally like this thick. And so we flipped. So my brother-in-law, who wasn't playing, grabbed the book. He's like, I'll look it up for the challenge. So he looks it up and he finds it and he's like, it's in here. And I was like, it's in there. And my brother and sister-in-law were kind of like, oh. And so my brother-in-law reads it and he says, it means people who, when they grasp for straws to win board games. And everybody died laughing. And so now, anytime we play a game where somebody is like desperately trying to win or trying to score, then we're like, stop re-leaping. And it's become sort of a meaning, has its own meaning, a new meaning, separate from its morphology. And so I tell you that next time somebody is trying to really working hard to try to score points, y'all can say they're re-leaping, and eventually it will be a word. My point in the dictionary was it was this huge dictionary, and it had one entry that said RE hyphen, a prefix that can be added to a verb that means to do the verb again. And so for me, that means, hey, you can add it to lots of verbs. They don't have to necessarily be in the dictionary. So my argument was that it was a word because it was a well-formed word according to English morphology. And when you see it, you know what it means, or could mean, that it could mean leap again. But now we have an extra meaning for it, a meaning that grasping at straws to win board games. And so you can use that with your friends. So is it a word? Is it not? It doesn't really matter. I mean, I think it is. It could be that you see a ballerina leaps and then leaps again and they re-leap. So, but no, it's not used, and you probably wouldn't recognize it as a familiar word, but I think it could be. So when we look at morphology, the things that I would like for you to know about morphology, we could get really in depth, but I'd really like for you to know the basic idea of what morphology is, that we can have morphemes. We can classify morphemes as free and bound. We have things that we can, little word chunks that don't stand alone, but can be added to other words that are called affixes, which are prefixes and suffixes. Some languages have infixes that go kind of in the middle. Prefixes go before a word, suffixes go after a word, infixes can sometimes go in the middle of the word. And we can classify those prefixes and suffixes as derivational or inflectional. And compound words are a word formation process that English uses really liberally, that maybe other languages don't always use a compound word process. So those are the key things I would like for you to know about morphology. As we continue, we will look at specifically like what is a morpheme. And it's the very smallest piece of a word that has meaning. And so it's the smallest unit of meaning. And words themselves can be a single morpheme, so they could be one, or they could be made up of multiple morphemes. One of the things that I think you need to be able to do as a teacher of language and reading, and really your subject matter as well, you need to be able to take words apart into their morphemes, because it will help you understand language, but also help you teach your students the meanings of different words, especially when you get into content vocabulary that have long words with lots of morphemes and roots and suffixes and prefixes. So the word book has one morpheme. It's just by itself. You can't break it down in any meaningful chunks the way we could break down RELEAP. Books. The word books, plural form, has two morphemes, book and the plural s. So you can separate that into book, meaning the thing that you can read on your or ebook, whatnot. But a book meaning multiple thing that's multiple pages that you can read and turn the pages, and s meaning more than one of those things, more than one of those. Both of those have meaningful units. Both of those are meaningful units. So when we look below, when we look at the words below, give you some samples and show you how those would break down into the different morphemes. So a word could have several morphemes in it, or it could stand alone as one morpheme. So car is one. Dog house can be separated into dog and house, so that's two. Uncovered can be separated into three morphemes. Uncover ed. So you got three things that you can break apart there. Workers, work, s. Unfaithful, unfaithful. So take a moment and go through these words and count how many morphemes you have, and try to identify which morphemes they are. What are the morphemes? If you pause the video, then you can come back and I'll go over them on the next slide. Quietly can be broken down into quiet and ly. So quiet is the adjective, and then you add ly and it becomes an adverb, how, like telling how you do something. Changing, change-ing. The e gets dropped, but that's a spelling pattern, not necessarily part of the morpheme. It's just the spelling pattern. Unhappiness, unhappiness. Again, you have a spelling change when you add the ness on there. The y changes to an I, but you can still see the parts there, unhappy and ness. Text is a single morpheme, can't be broken down anymore into meaningful units. Desktop is a compound word, so that's two morphemes, desk and top. Computer can be broken down into compute and Achievement, achieve, and meant. So achieve plus meant takes achieve, which is a verb, and adding meant changes it and makes it a noun. The act of achieving, or what someone has achieved. Triangle has two morphemes, tri, meaning three, and angle. Reaction this one's a little tricky because you think about it all as one thing, but you can actually break that down into three parts. So the main base word is act, and then you can react, and you can have a reaction. So you take the verb act and you add re. It's still a verb, react. And then you add T-I-O or T-I-O-N, but you only put one T in there. So T-I-O-N is shun. That makes that verb a noun, reaction. A reaction is the what happens that when you are reacting to something, the act of reacting. Okay, so I think I'm going to pause there and start a new video for you. So follow me on to the next video.